Good morning, ladies and gentlemen from Munich. Warm welcome. My name is Susanne Luther. I am the director of the Institute for International Cooperation of Hans Seidel Foundation. And for me, it's a great pleasure to open this seminar and to introduce you all to our new series of Hans Seidel Foundation, Talking Asia Politics, and especially now the Hans Seidel Foundation China-India Dialogue series. We have, with this in mind, we will have 3 more online sessions planned this year. Given the circumstances, we will like to make the best out of it and now try to discuss covering great distances worldwide, which might be also a very positive aspect, although the conditions worldwide, given the COVID virus, are of course very severe and serious. We will have 3 more online sessions coming up, covering interesting topics like multilateralism, climate and environment, and also women's issues. Let me now give you a short background to this new series and about our intentions. With this new online series, Talking Asia Politics, The Age of Asia, Hans Seidel Foundation, China-India Dialogue, the Hans Seidel Foundation would like to discuss similarities, differences, conflicts of interest and perceptions of these 2 big countries. No other region of the world will shape the future as much as Asia in the years coming up, and also Europe's future will very much be influenced by these 2 great Asian powers. While China is seen in Europe as a partner, but also as a strategic competitor, India is first and foremost seen as a valued partner when it comes to multilateralism. This is a very, of course, maybe a superficial analysis, and we would like to dig a bit deeper. We would really want to ask each other if this all is really the case. We would like to find answers to these interrelationships, answers for the countries themselves and the region, but also for European actors. In general, Hans Seidel Foundation would like to strengthen the discussion on Asia and the interrelation with Europe through various online and publication formats. More will follow soon. And I am really very much happy about this initiative as it also will bring together a more coordinated approach when it comes to Hans Seidel Foundation dealing with Asia. Presently, we focus on 2 big regions in Asia, South and Southeast Asia, and on the other hand, North, East and Central Asia. We presently have 2 separate desks at Munich headquarters, having here Stefan Burkhardt and Dr. Isabel Habrecht dealing with the 2 regions. And now this initiative will also bring discussions in Hans Seidel Foundation more together, of course, with a more coordinated approach, which is very interesting also for us. So thank you also for this initiative. With this in mind, let us turn to today's topics. In November 2020, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership became what will be the world's largest free trade agreement. And now 2.2 billion people living in a free trade zone, which includes all ASEAN countries, as well as Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and above all, of course, China. A striking signal from the Chinese government to the political centers in Europe, in the United States of America, and also in India, as India, which we all know, had pulled out of the negotiations only a year earlier. With this in mind, I would like very much to welcome our today's experts. Welcome very much, Wang Yiwei, Jean Monnet Chair Professor and Director of the Institute of International Affairs, who was formerly a diplomat at the Chinese mission to the European Union, and who is mainly focusing his research interests on the Belt and Road Studies, on European integration, on public diplomacy, on Chinese foreign policy and EU-China relations. Welcome also very much to Sachin Chaturvedi, Director General at the Research and Information System for Developing Countries, which is a New Delhi-based think tank. He works on issues related to development economics involving development finance, SDGs, and South-South cooperation, apart from trade, investment, and innovation linkages with special focus on WTO. He also is a member of the Board of Governors of the Reserve Bank of India, so also welcome to you. And I'm personally very happy to welcome also Saskia Hieber, who is going to take over the moderation this morning. For me, meeting Saskia Hieber always is a happy, now this time digital reunion, as both of us share a strong passion for the region, having both studied international relations at Munich University, having listened to the same great teachers there. And in difference to my approach, I have become more a generalist, now dealing with all our Hans Seidel projects worldwide in more than 50 countries, located on the Asian continent, but also in Africa and Latin America. But Saskia Hieber has stuck to the issue and has been following the part through the Asia-Pacific region. So Saskia, thank you very much for taking over the moderation and for guiding us through this morning. And I'm very interested also in listening now to the exchange of thoughts and ideas. I'm happy to open this session. And with this, I would like to directly pass now on to Sachin Chaturvedi. The floor is yours. Thank you very much for all of you who are now joining us and are listening to us. And I hope that you all come back when we continue with this interesting series. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Dr. Susan Loder. At the outset, I would very much like to greet everyone as whatever time zone you are in. Good morning, good afternoon, probably good evening. At the outset, I would also like to thank Hans Seidel Foundation for thinking of this very important dialogue, as Dr. Sudan mentioned, this series that would be focusing on two great nations of Asia and two great civilizations, I would say. And I think India and China and their relationship, bilateral relationship, would have huge impact on how we see economic growth, stability, and wider global connect. So I'm extremely thankful to HSF for inviting us and unleashing this major task that is there for us to take forward. And I see Germany as a great stabilizer. And from that point of view, I congratulate HSF. I know the German government's major program with DIE on managing global governance with emerging economies. And I think it's important that among those emerging nations, China and India have cordial relationship that contributes to larger global gain and collective progress forward. And from that point of view, I think the idea of this series is extremely important. Having said that, today's discussion focuses on RCEP, and I would very much like to take that on a larger pedestal in terms of how we see the trade linkages coming in and how we see trade as an instrument for development and not trade as an end in itself. And from that point of view, India's withdrawal from RCEP has several stories that re-emphasize the importance of development space that each nation requires as we go forward with our idea of globalization. And as is being discussed, economic development depends on how we bring people at the center, how we bring livelihood security at the center, and we do not end up with globalization, which is bereft of human sensitivities and job securities that are needed across the livelihood securities that are needed. Having been working on South-South cooperation, I see India, China as great partners, and they can do together several important things which are going to contribute in this area. Now, on the RCEP, at the outset, I would like to mention that ASEAN centrality is important when we talk about RCEP. And India's agreements are there with almost all the member countries here, with ASEAN itself, but also with Japan, with South Korea, also with Australia and New Zealand. They are in progress with ASEAN itself. And within ASEAN, India has bilateral free trade agreements with Singapore, with Thailand, the early harvest scheme that was done, and also with Malaysia. So there are these arrangements with ASEAN that are of importance. China is one concern within RCEP, and that was the case and still is the case. If you look at the Bangkok Agreement, which later on became the Asia-Pacific Trade Agreement in 2005, APTA, we find that the scope was limited. So not that India and China did not have any agreement. Under Bangkok Agreement, under APTA, we have these linkages which provide the gravitas and the possibility that is there. So India's engagement with ASEAN is continuing. Our imports are as huge as $57 billion, and with 34.2 billion imports that are exports that are there, and it is growing. Dr. Saskia Habib, which is important, is that it is growing at the pace of 7.5%. And if you see in the whole period of 2008 to 2019, the pace, the CAGR is at 13.4% for our imports from ASEAN and 14% for our exports. So you see a pace that is there in our engagement with ASEAN. So RCEP or no RCEP, India's trade with ASEAN is multiplying, and so is the case with Japan and South Korea, where we see this huge traction. And much more important, Dr. Saskia, is in terms of India's connect with the intermediate products, the parts and components. So if you see India's import from ASEAN, it is almost 50% of our basket is full with intermediate products, products which are going to be part of the value chains. Similarly, our exports, as much as 40% of India's exports to ASEAN are intermediate products. So you see a sort of scope for strengthening the value chain connect between India and ASEAN. And this, I think, is going to be extremely crucial as we go forward. During the RCEP negotiations, some of the Indian companies like Amul, etc., came up with dairy sector under threat of RCEP. But I think they are peripheral actors. And if you see, India is world's second largest milk producer. So some of this, I think, would have to be seen in the context that is required. But with China, in the RCEP, our concern was very much about trade deflation that would have happened, particularly in the context of rules of origin. So goods from China coming in from third countries, undermining the rules of origin that India wanted, I think would be an extremely important consideration. And China also appreciates that. It's not that if we leave aside the current ongoing security border debate between India and China, now both sides are realizing that our constructive engagement with each other is very important. And I have some of my best friends in China with whom we have a lot of academic interaction, and we have been working together with them. But if you see the challenges, there are commodities that are of great significance where the non-tariff barriers from China are there. China is a market economy, and the inability to act in terms of the tariffs. If you see average tariff of China, it is 9.5%. And if you see the 20-year transition that China, South Korea FTA gave to China, is something that India was asking for in the non-FTA partner countries. So we had proposed that a 6% plus or minus tariff should be allowed in the RCEP where countries with which FTAs are not there, and in this case, China and India do not have an FTA. So if all other ASEAN countries and other members of RCEP are getting 80% tariff, China should be at 86%, so that we have the water to negotiate later. And this is something that we ask for, and I think that is extremely important for the local sort of actors. But given the fact that India has already talked about the Atmanirbhar Bharat or self-reliant India, India has been talking about international competitiveness and globalization. So it is not about domestic inward-looking economy that we are looking for. We want interdependent, globally competitive Indian industry, but the nations have like for instance, China has Made in China 2025, and so is the idea. But I think it is important that China appreciates the industrialization and, as I said, local competition. So, Dr. Saskia, we did a study in India of the huge trade deficit that India has with China, almost of $60 billion. So if you look at the statistics, we find that there are around 3,326 products out of 4,044 that we are importing from China, almost 82%. And these products, out of them, 327 products are those where our import is almost 66.6% out of the total $90 billion that we are importing from China. So only 327 products constitute 66% of India's trade. So at RIS, my colleague, Professor Mohanty, who led the research, has come out with some of these numbers where if India addresses 327 products from China, then we are able to address almost a deficit of $66.6 billion. And that's where we want a greater sort of sensitivity from China in terms of how we look at the issues which are of great significance. With my 10 minutes time that was allocated to me, I would stop here by making this point that more sensitivity, more concerned about local livelihood security and development of all, with the idea of collective economic development, collective participation. India and China would have to address trade issues, not in the way typical North-South issues were addressed, not the way several developed countries have addressed, but China being of the South, we require greater South-South cooperation and participation to move forward collectively. Thank you.
Professor Chaturvedi, thank you very much for this very interesting and very dense presentation, the ideas about China-India cooperation. Thank you very much for pointing out that China and India are great partners, and that definitely the Chinese-Indian relationship will dominate and have a huge impact on international political and trade relations. You put the people, security, and livelihood in the center of your observations. Allow me just to pull out a few details. You mentioned India has a great trade relations with some parts of Southeast Asia, but China is a major concern, and India has a huge trade deficit with China. India fears a trade inflation, and of course we are confronted with China's massive development and economic policy boosting programs like China 2025, China 2035. When India marched out of the negotiations after many years, not only economic papers but foreign policy papers ran headlines and asking about what was really behind the curtain. I'm very much looking forward to that. India's self-reliance policy will play a role, and the big question about the competitiveness of the Indian industry. And with that, I'm very happy and honored to hand over the floor to Professor Wang. Kindly share your screen, kindly share your insights, your observations, and your research with us. Professor Wang, and after Professor Wang's presentation and short lecture, I would like to invite Professor Chaturvedi to respond and then give the word back to Professor Wang, and then we will open the floor to a larger discussion and Q&A. Professor Wang, please. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me, and pretty thanks for the organizer, the German Hans Sachin Foundation. The very good topic, RCEP, and also China-India relations. And we learned a lot from the European integration for Asia integration. Even we consider about the European Union as a model for Asia. But it's more complex, difficult for Asia because history, cultural complexity, and some territory disputes like China-India still remain. And also geographically more complex, high Himalaya, and then desert and the sea, and also difficult relations between China and Japan before, and now China, India. And most difficult is US, they still have a hub-spoken system in Asia. But we still achieved a lot. RCEP, I think, is one of the most important achievements for Asia integration so far. It's the most populist area, and so it's particularly for China, Japan, and South Korea, because digital, we say netizens, this is about the new transformation of the digitalization after the pandemic crisis. So it's very meaningful. And like Deng Xiaoping said before, and without China and India co-rise, there's no Asia century. So now the most challenging relations between China and India, and if RCEP we can include India, definitely this is Indo-Pacific for Asia. I think very important. So the history back to the Asia financial crisis. During that time, China let the RMB not appreciate it, and they built the confidence, and also join the ASEAN Amity and Friendship Treaty. And then Japan follow, and South Korea. So that's 10 plus 1, and ASEAN 10 with China, and then 10 plus 3, South Korea, Japan, and China. And then include India and Australia and New Zealand, so 10 plus 6. And now it's RCEP based on that. So now it's 15 countries, if in India, 16. Why India exits, we understand, because they worry about the competition from made in China, and from other Asian market. But we opened the door still to India's participation. At the same time, some Asian countries said maybe we are lucky for not having India currently, because India joined and make this negotiation more complex and take more time. We learn experience from WTO negotiation, now even SCO and the BRICS. And so this is, I think that so far we achieved. But basically, the RCEP is on the tariff reduction. Average 90% is not so high level as CPTPP means 0. And also compared to European integration is not so high level. However, the significance of is very, we cannot be neglect. Firstly, as the most dynamic and complex market in the world, particularly, as I said, it's a netizens, digital mutual connectivity. When the RCEP can come into being, 10% of the trade will be increased coming for 5 years. So that's very meaningful, particularly after the pandemic crisis. And secondly, the global supply chain and value chains on the base of not just made in Japan before, now made in China. So it's very important because Asia is the most dynamic market in the world. And also it's helpful for Asia to join the global high-level trade and investment negotiation. And also for the world, I would like to recommend you to read the Asia Development Bank's analysis. The mention about the whole world stand to benefit from the agreement with estimated global income gains of $186 billion in 2013. So spill effect is very important, including to the European Union and the United States. Also stimulate European Union hard up to the negotiation with China. So now we, after RCEP, can reach the deal. and then RCEP, and then the China European Union say investment treaty reached the agreement. So I think that's a spillover effect as well. I think the most importantly is Asia way in the global governance, globalization. With the Asian way, firstly means it's a very inclusiveness. It's not exclusive anybody. It's not like the American way. American ways may be without. So we include inclusive to everybody, including India, maybe in the future. I think United States. And secondly, it's more promoted way. So we are not so ambitious like European integration or even China-Europe investment treaty. We not include very controversial areas like labor, environment, sustainable development, even agriculture. Otherwise, we cannot reach the deal. So that's kind of Asian way, gradually. And also, this is also Asian wisdom. Firstly, we should develop and then to reach the norms. And then let the norms guide the high level development. I think that's, it's not like European integration. European integration set the high level standard first, like a GDPR, like in digital governance. However, GDPR also do harm to the European digital market because like a blockchain technology, the difficult big data. Now the European Parliament also think about the reform that if too high level, you should develop enough, and then you can have a high standard, not to set a too high standard at the beginning. And fourthly, the organizer raised the question to me about what China policy. I think the China policy in the RCEP is very important. China support ASEAN take the leading role. I think this is, we also learned European integration. The begins from the Benelux, small nations right first, and then take the leading role. And then France, the reconciliation and the European integration move. I think the China's supported the ASEAN take the leading role. This is very important to make this RCEP finalize the negotiation. And also China's policies after the pandemic crisis, I think it's not globalization, it's global regionalization, globalization. So the global value chain is not just too global, maybe resilient and safety. I think this is also European Americans' consideration. So after RCEP, China declared to join this negotiation of CPTPP. CPTPP, I think, is very high level, definitely, which can include China and the US. US maybe after 1 year or can also come back to join the negotiation. And then where FTAAPs maybe is possible, the free trade zone in the Asia Pacific is very ambitious. So RCEP, the meaning is bring China and South Korea and Japan in, because the bilateral, they don't have the FTA yet, but it's very important. And Japan is not so much interested about this trilateral because they worry about China's dominant influence. And even after the Indians quit from the negotiation of the RCEP, Japan hesitate, but China and Japan, I think, negotiate and then China finally make it happen. And our CPTPP also make China and US relations connected. It's hating so-called decouple and Cold War. I think that's very important for the stability and prosperity in Asia Pacific, and also extend maybe India Pacific as well. And also, it's also work for China's high-level open reform. When China's open reform is more at the beginning, it's more focused on the labor, capital, and so that can compare the advantage. Now it's more focused on the innovation, focused more on the high level rules, norms, standards, so institutionalized of the harmonization of the. So I think the dual circulation strategy of the China, they basically circulate from the Chinese neighbors, particularly ASEAN. Last year, ASEAN passed the European Union as the trade #1 trade partner for China. I think in the past 15 years, it's European Union. And also last year, China be the #1 trade partner for European Union. So this is very meaningful. So China is not just keep the world factory position, but also towards the world market direction. And then RCEP Belt Initiative and CAI also work for that. And then finalize to how to manage the disputes between China and India, China, Japan, and Australia. That's the question given to me. So there's so-called the Asia paradox. Previous South Korean President Park Geun-hye identified so-called the Asian countries security more rely on the US protection market, economy more rely on Chinese market. So this is a Asia paradox. Not even the world paradox in other countries, including Latin American, European countries as well. So if China and the US have the so-called decarbon and new Cold War, and the world will be in a mess. But fortunately, we have RCEP and China will join the CPTPP. So how to manage this? I think China said there is no alliance system for China. We are partnership, not alliance, because alliance is exclusive and also have the third party as a single potential enemy or threat. So we think about Japan, South Korea can be the US alliance at the same time be China's partners. And economic cooperation, not necessary to be obstacle, take the security dispute, even territorial dispute at the obstacle. I think this is Asia wisdom, as I mentioned. And now I think Australia and Japan improve the relations because of RCEP with China. So this is economic cooperation contribute to the political confidence building. And then China and India. If India join RCEP, there's no need for India to use the territorial dispute that so-called decouple with China, recouple with the United States. Because for India, actually, the infrastructure building, economic cooperations, definitely the China experience is more useful and fresh for India, because as the most largest developing countries and 10 billion people, I think even the we will also welcome India come back with ASEAN, and then so-called India-Pacific strategy, not make so-called the Asia integration be divided as a security and economic, and also credit for China and Japan. Olympic Games in this summer and the next Beijing winter is good opportunity for China and Japan to show the transformation of energy. We will use the hypertonic the new energy for China and Japan. So this is also we also learn from European Union. So China and Japan, currently they have the 80% of the tariff. If RCEP come to force, well, 86% of the tariff will be reduced. So it's very meaningful, particularly for the more than 8,000 of the goods, and also it is also very meaningful for China open reform, high level open reform. So I think the RCEP and the China-India relations, this is will be have a most ever effect for the European integration. We will definitely China and the European Union work together can also help the RCEP reach more high level, and also FTAP. Now even the UK also want to join the CPTPP. Make this also maybe a good linkage, global Britain to be global broker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Wang, for your explanations and sharing your research findings with us. Allow me to just highlight a few of your findings. You mentioned the importance of Asian integration despite of very complex political and geographical conditions in Asia. So the EU is a wishful thinking model for Asia, but not in the reachable reality very soon. The Asian financial crisis played a role in Asia's larger economic relations, of course. Thank you for mentioning the future challenges Asia will have to face. That's not only digitalization, but climate and energy security, of course. Asia is the most dynamic market in the world, and China might be a useful experience model for India here. We will be very curious to learn whether China really opened markets to India, which might have less competitive industrial branches here. And of course, made in China is a competition for any producer in Asia. Thank you very much. We will be curious to learn whether which role a new round of TPP will play in Asian and Asian American relations here. The region is very important, especially intra-Asian trade, which makes up most of the Asian trades at all. And with that, I would like to invite Professor Chaturvedi to briefly respond to Professor Wang's explanations, and then give Professor Wang again the chance to reply to Professor Chaturvedi's comments. And then, as we do have the first, let's say, questions on the panel already, I would like to open up the floor to other questions. Please, Professor Chaturvedi, briefly, here you go.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Habia. Thanks, Professor Wang, for very stimulating and very substantive presentation this morning. I think it's a great observation in terms of how Asian sanctuary would face challenges that are emanating out of the lack of infrastructure, particularly for digital connectivity and our collective efforts for energy. The new paradigm that we need with only a decade in hand to achieve Agenda 2030. I think this is absolutely important for India and China to work together for enabling not only the Asian countries, but our partners in Africa to achieve SDGs. And I think we have a collective responsibility to do the necessary hand-holding, both in terms of enabling digitalization and digital connectivity, but also energy and the dependence on solar and wind power, reducing carbon footprint as we go forward, bringing the resilient, disaster resilient infrastructure to be built up. I think we have great role as members of the BRICS to take the new development bank and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank to take forward access to finance, access to resources, cost-effective access to resources as a major responsibility of these two nations. This would include the financial inclusion that we want. It would enable countries that are bereft of the development finance access, which is hovering all across the African countries. The second point that you mentioned, I think, is important, and I would like to extrapolate that in terms of our collective responsibility to take the reformed multilateralism forward. Both of us are members of G20. The Italian presidency has placed the global pandemic and the crisis that the whole world is grappling with in terms of the global governance that is required of various sectors. And I think we can work together for that. On the idea of inviting India and mentioning the relevance of India coming back on table, thanks a lot, Professor Bang. I think you have said what I had also mentioned in terms of India coming back, in terms of how we see Asian integration happening. And that, I think, would be a seamless flow of trade across Southeast Asia to South Asia to Central Asia and Europe further. So Eurasia Connect that we see, Europe is the center of culture and cultural hub, but Europe lends towards Asia for commercial and economic market access. And we need to see how cultural and economic integration converge for ensuring localization of development. And I think the inequalities that we have ended up with, probably our partnerships would address that in a forceful manner. I think it would also be pertinent here to mention detailed analysis my institute has done in terms of competitiveness that is needed across manufacturing. And Professor Wang, it has emerged in our studies that the China compulsory certification, CCC, is one important instrument which has emerged as a non-tariff barrier to block imports from India in China. If you allow that market access, probably we would be able to emerge as countries which have mutual trust and confidence when it comes to trade and investment partnership. I think by allowing our partnership to grow in a natural evolution, in an organic evolution, would be extremely important. You would not believe, but we have done analysis at our institute. As I said, we have a trade deficit of $60 billion. And my institute has done a research showing that 90% of this trade deficit is only because of 327 products. And if I take out only 27 products, it is 70%. So those 27 products we can import from sources other than China. China has invested in trade facilitation, so logistic costs have come down. But we can import from Latin America, we can import from Europe, which is now emerging as a manufacturing hub. But China has advantage of being world's factory. But that is also a cost other countries are paying because of loss of livelihood security. So we need to see how growth is ensured in all parts of the world. We ensure pools of growth in all parts of the world, and everybody is contributing to be part of this global integration or Asian integration that we are talking about. So I think it is important, Professor Wang, that we go in terms of the balanced approach that is needed in trade, and not just one country to dominate with the kind of infrastructure that China has evolved. And there are a lot of these dimensions that we can learn from China. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Chaturvedi. Professor Wang, thank you very much for responding to these explanations. Now, I do find a difference in atmosphere here because China is very future-minded and future-oriented. I think both countries share the need for taking up responsibility for regional and global development. But this seems to be a difference between China and India, and that is China's incredible future-mindedness, future orientation, and of course, the political will to invest a lot into the future here. We will not be able to resolve all questions here, and the question of Indian competitiveness on a global scale and regional scale will remain, and the question of China's open markets and non-tariff restrictions. Professor Wang, if you would like to briefly respond, you have the chance now. Here you go. And I would like to remind all our participants and discussants now that this is an economic policy dialogue. This is about trade, economy. This is not a security policy or a foreign policy trade dialogue here. Okay, Professor Wang, please.
Thank you, Professor Chaturvedi. I found that we have more consensus with our Indians, other colleagues, security and strategy studies. We have more dispute and even quarrel with them because every time talk about territory dispute, security, China threat, and the US strategy. But economic, I think we have more pragmatic and also future-oriented thinking. So we have more consensus, no so many dispute. I would like to answer the organizer, and in Chinese views, I think China, India, we have more similarities than you imagine. It's like we like the first foreign minister of India, 1947, and Panchari, he said, in the eyes of Asia, the World War I is a European civil war. So it's the Indians and the Chinese think about Asia is more complex and more difficult. So our achievements is also very meaningful, not just the European Union. Because after the Cold War, there's no wars in Asia anymore. Still 3 wars in Europe, of course, in European Union's neighbors. So this RCEP is very meaningful for that. And China, India, there's some differences, of course. Firstly, China is a united country in the past 3,000 years. So India maybe not united, not because of the British colony, and even in the history. So now, why China can be the world factory and even digital giant? We are most united, and also we have Communist Party strong leadership, and so that's and also quite a circular society. This circular is positive. It's not in the English means don't believe any God. We believe different gods, but go beyond that. We have the haven thinking. So that's very interesting, I think. And the Chinese people, that's why we work so hard. And then European Union claim this is unfair competition because maybe you work too hard of the two subsidies from the state-owned enterprises, so-called systematic rival. So China, India, actually, we are the founders of the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. So our diplomatic wisdoms can shoot and can turn into the economic integration. That's our hope. So we can jointly to start European integration and try to learn from that. Why Germany and France can make the reconciliation, but why not China and India? So I think that's basically we need to work together because most dynamic and populist regions and nations, if we can integrate, and the world will be more towards the peace and prosperity direction.
Thank you very much, Professor Wang. We won't delve too much into history now. The narrative of China's union as a state or nation and civilization for 3,000 years is very famous now. And the Indian Union and the Union of India, of course, has a different political system here. So that is of great interest, of course. I would like to come back to the world of the economy. We do have a few questions here, and allow me to pick up an important issue. Is it the political nature of China's state-led economy and China's centrally or in the past centrally controlled economy and state-guided economy that built up China's success, whereas India is so diverse and so different and so complex to govern and to guide into a new economy? The background of this question is that India, since the 1990s, is trying to and is forced to build up a modern, future-oriented, competitive economy and industry, and might have failed, at least partly. Professor Wang, briefly on the nature and the success of China through the state-led economy, and then Professor Chaturvedi. We had a brief question about China's reluctance to accept the importance of India's sovereignty claims. I would just remind you that this is an economic dialogue here, and RCEP for China is a partnership. So this is important what Professor Wang mentioned. It's a partnership. RCEP is not an alliance. Okay, on the Chinese state-led economy, Professor Wang, please.
I think the China joined WTO in 2001 fundamentally changed the world, and also China. We embrace the market economy, but before open reform, China's per capita GDP is less than 1/3 of South Sahara Africans' per capita GDP. So that's a very poor economy. How can we reach the market principle? So the government should play a very important role in building infrastructure, particularly for the state-owned enterprises. So it's like building a swimming pool, training the babies how to swim, and then when you're grown up, and then you can swim in the sea. So now we have the industrial park, a special economic zone, like a Belt Initiative. So that's China experience. We are not against the market principle. So we are a less developed country at the beginning. So we should gradually to reach the market principles, as I said. So Europeans claim China is a superpower now. China said we are a developing country, per capita GDP, according to the World Bank. So the state should play a very important role. It's not an unfair competition. It's not no transparency. It's not. I think India agree with that. But the Indian problem, as I said, is no strong Communist Party leadership and not united in the history. So India definitely needs to learn from China, share with China experience. But other countries, now African countries, they want to share with China experience to gradually to reach the goal of the market principle. So-called reciprocity engagement of the European Union side is not meaningful because the European Union is not a single country and you are most advanced economy. So we should try to learn from you and then reach your goal and not just immediately to reach your goal. I think that's the first question to raise to you. So state should play a very important role, particularly after Trump, 4 years of so-called decouple with China. And China said the government should play a more important role to bring the safety of the supply chain and also for the key technologies and the key sectors in the global supply chains. And so that's the dual circulation strategy meaning. And the second question to you about China-India competition. That's a very natural because the populous nations, co-run and neighbors, and also have territory. So it's, the competition is it's unavoidable. However, we always said that the territory dispute is not between us. It's because of so-called Great Britain colonized heritage. This is we suffered from that colonization, and India in the Great Britain's empire period. India says now, okay, left, and you are the CEO of this East Indian company. So, so there maybe that's the Indians' misunderstanding about the British Empire. Maybe Chinese misunderstanding. We can talk about later. So I think China and India can work together to build the you said this modern society. India needs use China as a target to rebuild the modern society, decouple with China to build your industrial system. But this is not necessarily the good way for you to do that. Why not rethinking? Maybe we can work together, not just under the RCEP, even Belt and Initiative and others to reach your goal. China not think about India as a threat. China's main purpose is to unify our country. So US is more challenging in the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea. India definitely is not a threat. It's not an enemy of China. So we need to work together to contribute to Asia integration. Otherwise, the Europeans will love us.
Thank you, Professor Wang. No, we won't laugh. No, nobody will laugh, and we will. Working together is very important. Thank you very much for mentioning that India and China share the experience of suffering from a colonial past, despite of the different structures that have been forced upon India and forced upon China here. Professor Chaturvedi, is India's new economic policy of autonomous economy of self-reliance going in a way of a state-led economy?
Not exactly, Dr. Habia. Thanks for the question. As you would be aware, there's a huge debate in economic literature about sequencing of economic reforms. And as you rightly referred, India embarked on the journey of liberalization in 1991. And at that point, this liberalization and opening up was thrusted upon India under the Washington consensus of the World Bank and IMF. And we were forced to open up the sectors without adequate preparedness that is needed in terms of having a say on the nature of industrial policy. India was not the only country that had to embrace the structural adjustment program. We have seen the fate of the Latin American economies, the democracies of the world, which have accepted the Washington consensus as suggested by the global institutions of World Bank and IMF, and have ended up in huge number of troubles. The 1991 reforms of India, they were done at a point when domestic industry was not prepared. Now, in last 7 years, you find Prime Minister Modi has given this new space that you require for industrial and economic growth, for development, and for creating the private entrepreneurship, the Startup India, the Digital India, and several new programs that have been launched in India that are somehow not there in the past. So in a democracy, arriving on one concrete vision to move forward and keep that consistently through elections after elections is not easy. But we are happy that we are on the track that India requires, and that's the way everybody in India is now feeling, and that's why Prime Minister Modi got a resounding victory in his second round, and people are expecting that in the third round as well, when it would come up in 2024. So this huge commitment for development is not at the cost of compromising space for individual citizens. Each individual citizen has a space that they want, and the nature of development that they want. So even if we are slow in terms of moving forward, but we are consistently moving forward. And we are providing the bandwidth that is needed for development. The amount of financial inclusion at the domestic level that we have achieved is marvelous. The amount of vaccine, the amount of development finance that we are able to scale up in the post-pandemic world, when the world was completely on a standstill and completely derailed from productive engagements, India could come out of those ashes and could support not only Indian industry and Indian economic growth, but also in the neighborhood and with our partners in Africa. So I think it is important for us to see that we are not growing alone, but we are growing with others. We are not safe alone, but we are safe with others. And that is where we see our competence and our ability to provide vaccines that are doing what they are doing. So I think trade and economic development, Dr. Habia, I think they go hand in hand together with the nature of development that each citizen in India would like to have. And from that point of view, I feel that democracy may have a slow pace, but has steady pace. And this is very clear in last 7 years of journey. And I'm sure the new programs that have been launched for self-reliant India are for self-reliant, but internationally competitive India. We are opening it up sector by sector, and in the areas where our firms, the required support are going to go that way. And as a research institution and as a think tank here in Delhi, we are consistently articulating our position in terms of the new narrative that India requires to go on for this international competitiveness. India's agreement with Mauritius, India's growing interest with the African Free Trade Agreement is a case in point, which is reflection. And next week, India-Bangladesh would announce the trade partnership that they would announce. So I think there are these new phases that we are entering in when it comes to our partnership. And I think with the democratic setup, things are going steadily, but I'm sure going in the right direction.
Thank you very much, Professor Chaturvedi. Professor Wang, you mentioned important cooperations and the connectivity, the Asian way of inclusiveness, RCEP as a partnership. You mentioned important platforms and fora of cooperation like BRICS, the Brazilian, Russian, Indian, Chinese initiative. And I would like to draw your attention and the discussion to another important infrastructure investment initiative from China, the Belt and Road Initiative, which China set up not only to develop the neighborhood, the region, but connectivity, communication, and tried corridors out of Asia and reach out to the whole world. Would you like to explain the Belt and Road Initiative's connections to RCEP, the importance of these two plans and initiatives? Professor Wang.
Thank you. The Belt and Road Initiative 2013, at the beginning, we highlight the cooperation of the infrastructure building and mutual connectivity. After the pandemic crisis, I think the priority is more focused on the digital connection and health, the Silk Road for health, and the Green Silk Road, and the so-called, we say, high quality, high standard, domestically and internationally. It's more focused on the regionalization. I think RCEP is one of the priority of the Belt and Road Initiative cooperation. Most of the RCEP members, they signed the cooperation MOU with China. Even Japan also signed the third-party market cooperation agreement with the Chinese government, and South Korea as well. And other countries, they signed maybe in some particular, like financial corporations, including UK. So also we have AIIB, which India benefited mostly, I think, from the AIIB. So AIIB is an international bank, but they work together for contribute to infrastructure, mutual connectivity in Asia, maybe in the future beyond Asia and across the different regions. Now the more than 100 members of the AIIB. So the Belt Initiative for the global transformation is very meaningful. Under that, the China-Europe Rail Express last year increased more than 50% the goods to support the pandemic, the Europeans to deal with the pandemic crisis, because there was the more medical equipments and also the mask and now even the vaccines. But most importantly, the investment, because last year China because we have Japan, the G7 country. We also have Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar are those less developed countries in the RCEP. So Belt and Road Initiative is also, so they have different levels of cooperation, different meaning. So we also, I think, can learn from the Europeans' multi-speed integration, right, process. And also, after the pandemic crisis, the Belt and Road Initiative, I think, is more welcome by not just the African countries and Asian countries, even Latin American countries as well. Because the thing about the Washington consensus is dead. Because of the gap between rich and poor is so huge. That's the reason the Trump elected so-called the 1% and 90% the problems. Polarization of US politics. And the US has more interest about the US-led regionalization and like NAFTA 2.0 and US-led alliance and also globalization. So, but Belt and Road Initiative like RCEP is like we say Asian way. It's mostly inclusive and also common but differentiated responsibilities for that. And also gradually to reach the goal, multi-level governance. We also learn from the European Union. So that's Belt and Road Initiative. I think it's more focused on the light infrastructure, not just soft infrastructure, not just hard infrastructure, because so many countries suffer the pandemic crisis, have so many so-called debt problems. We should readjustment. We should make this Belt and Road Initiative is more sustainable, more towards the green recovery, transformation, and digital transformation, and more people-oriented globalization, not just the capital-driven globalization.
Professor Wang, thank you very much. I would like a last very important when it comes to regional and global responsibility, that is crisis management and the fight against the pandemic. There is a question whether China would support India's proposals at the WTO to temporarily suspend intellectual property rights in order to speed up medical production of vaccination. The health market, of course, is an issue to China and India respectively. Maybe you could briefly comment on well, the worldwide crisis management and reduction of the pandemic, and the responsibilities of the Chinese governments and the responsibilities of the Indian government. And with these responses and answers, I would then close today's dialogue round. Professor Chaturvedi and then Professor Wang, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Habia. I think the IPR proposal that India and South Africa have proposed is being discussed across the South, and huge support is coming in from the other southern economies. And I think it's important for countries to have this access. In the past, on access to medicine, as Professor Wang said, India and China have less differences and more a common understanding of trade and economic issues. We have partnered together on several proposals in the past on intellectual property rights and even in other areas of international trade governance. So I'm very much sure in terms of we moving collectively in terms of how we address various global facets as we prepare for the next WTO ministerial.
Professor Wang, would China support India's proposal to temporarily suspend intellectual property rights?
I think we raised my understanding support, because this is a global pandemic humanitarian crisis. So it's a very urgent emergency. If we learn from the history, like the AIDS, right, happened in the US early in 1980s, and then suffered in Africa, still suffered a lot, because the poor people cannot buy the medicines, and also the IPR kept the IPR too long, 40 years. It is also the obstacles for the US join the TPP negotiation. Even Australia also complained about that. I think that's the reason China's government, we put the vaccines as a public goods, not for commercial use, to save the people's life. It's the most important urgent priorities for the human beings. So it's not just to make money or IPR is of course, after the emergency, after we control the situation, we will resume the normal of the IPR negotiation, how to manage that. But this is should according to the WHO negotiation.
Thank you very much, Professor Wang, Professor Chaturvedi. Thank you very much for giving us the honor and joining us on today's economic dialogue here on the new Hans Seidel Foundation's dialogue round on China-India economic talks here. Thank you very much. This had been a very high-profile, high-level morning here, and I'm fascinating by the differences we discovered, but on the chances of connected responsibility in Asia and the Asian ways. And we will be very curious, and now that we are so wonderfully informed, to conduct further research in your famous institutions and the studies and the work you do. Thank you very much, the organizers in India, in China. Thank you to the organizers in Munich, to the Hans Seidel Foundation. This is a future-minded, future-oriented, and very, very important series of dialogue. Thank you very much, everybody, and goodbye to Professor Wang in Beijing. Goodbye to Professor Chaturvedi. And with that, I would sort of invite you to join further Hans Seidel Foundation's dialogue round and conferences. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, thank you.